Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stitching Tales. I am Johanna Lundström.
And I am Malena Hjerpe.
And in today's episode, we are going to answer your questions because a while back we put a call out for questions and we got in some questions that we are planning to answer today. And if we don't have time to answer all of them, we're definitely going to do a follow-up episode, right, Malena? So that's really interesting. So I'm really curious if you have a question maybe that we should answer.
Yeah, and if I can be so selfish, a question for myself.
Yes.
To you or to listeners who maybe have some excellent tip for me. Is there any, I'm not looking for a gossip blog, but like a blog about what is happening in the sewing industry, like home sewing industry. What's the buzz? What's the news? What's going on? Like the new thing, I have really problem like scanning all the different places and keeping up with things. So do you have any tip or like this is like a newsfeed blog about what's going on in the home sewing industry, or does anyone else have a tip on blog, YouTube channel, Instagram, whatever?
Oh, that's a great question. I think let me see. The Fold Line do a YouTube series. I think it's called Sewing. I probably Sewing Report. I probably mispronounced this, but there's the Fold Line is one YouTube channel. They do an update with new pattern releases, and also Jennifer from Sewing Reporter. She's just like me, a journalist background, but she's doing sewing news. She also has a YouTube channel. So I think those are my main news resource that I know of, and of course if you love gossip, and don't we all, then I will lead you onto the Reddit thread Craft Snark. Where people will both share new sewing patterns and stuff, but also sometimes have opinions about us running the industry.
No, but it's just interesting to hear. I mean, not like dirty gossip or anything, but just like what are people talking about? What are they missing? What don't they like? What do they like? Like just you want to hear what are people talking about? So, but that's great. Then I have a few places to look into. And I mean, comment either on our Instagram account or YouTube channel. Do you have any tip for me? What should I follow so I'm updated? What's going on?
Yeah, we'd love to know that. So just drop us a comment on our YouTube channel or on our Instagram account, because I'm totally curious as well, because the ones I just mentioned top of mind, I think there are probably lots more than that. But it's hard to keep up with all the news, and I also think I don't know if there's a sewing newsletter maybe that one could, if you know of anyone that you could recommend to us, that would also be great to know as well. Otherwise, there's a gap in the market for someone to start a sewing newsletter. Not us, though.
Absolutely. But that was a selfish question for myself. Do you have anything from listeners?
Yes, I do. So the first one is in regards from about pattern. Let me see here. Fitting jeans. What is like the best fitting order? And I think that's more of a general question for pants, basically. I mean, where do you start? And so I'm gonna just give that question first to you, Malena, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the sewing and fitting process, particularly about jeans. But so the question is, when fitting jeans, what is the first step or area of your body to align with to fit the jeans pattern? And I would say this goes for all type of trouser patterns, right, Malena? So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, my thoughts first is if you need to do any tall or petite adjustments, do those first, and then it's good to actually check maybe not just your total body height, but it's basically from the waist and down. Are you a tall or petite or regular length there? Because I mean, it doesn't matter if you have a short or long torso if you're gonna fit pants. So focus on your bottom part then, basically, because then when you get your height right, then it's so much easier to actually know if you should increase, decrease width. Because if the heights are off, then it's difficult to know if, you should, is it too big or is it just placed on the wrong place on your body? But then I would say focus from, I don't know, either the seat or waist and focus on those area. And once you have fitted those area, the legs are more basically gravity. Like those will just hang nicely, or if it's more fitted trouser, then it's a little bit easier also to see if unity is just increasing or decreasing the width. Then the focus on getting the seat or hip and waist and the fitting in between there. And if it's really difficult to see, like if it's a balance issue, like that, I think that's the most difficult thing to know, if it's balance of the front and the back rise on the pattern. It might be easier to actually not have sewn the side seat entirely or the front and back rise entirely, because then you can a little bit easier pin or see how much width you need to add, or if it's the pattern pieces need to be shifted a little bit because the balance is a little bit off. It might be a little bit tricky to do these fittings, but it's a little bit easier then to see how the fabric is actually laying on your body compared to if you have sewn everything and there are just drag lines, or if you sew it and then cut it open and see how the fabric wants to shift. Because it's really just to analyze the drag lines can be really tricky. So I always, again, here we always talk about it, make a sample in a similar fabric, so you can cut in it. And then you don't need to have full length trouser. If you want to save fabric, you can make like just to the knee or something. But definitely to do this in on a how to say prototype, so you can with no problem cut in it, resew it, and just in a way cut away and see how much you want to adjust. So that's my very not a straight answer here.
Yeah, it's so hard to do this in audio version, but if you want to learn more, I highly recommend that you actually check out our book Fit for Knits. Even though it talks about knits, you all the things you talk about here, Malena, you also show in our book step by step, and also the different balance difficulties, and especially around the crotch area. I think we can all agree that the crotch area is probably the trickiest part to get right when you're fitting pants. So we have a whole section about that in the book, in our book Fit for Knits, which I highly recommend, because it is kind of difficult to explain all this in audio. And also, if you get my book Sewing Jeans, I also have not a large section, but a smaller section on how to do some certain common fitting issues. And as Malena says, it's very important to sew a sample, and especially when you're sewing jeans, because if you sew jeans in such a different sequence than you do regular trousers, and you also do top stitching before you join all the seams, so you can't really fit as you go once you cut into your precious denim fabric, because then you're going to have a nightmare to rip out all the things. So I would say even more importantly when you're sewing jeans is that you definitely need to do a sample beforehand just to get everything right. And you also have the yoke, so that causes a little bit of a different issues as well, because you don't normally work with darts, for instance, when you're sewing jeans. And maybe you need to add like a curved waistband instead of a straight waistband. So and all those specific things when it comes to sewing jeans, I show in the book as well. But yeah, it's a little bit trickier, I think. But the good part about, if you want to get the fit right on jeans, you're going to have way better fitting jeans than anything you will find in a store-bought jeans. So I think it's definitely worth the while. And I have like this what do you call it? My mind is, the like a basic pattern. What do you call it? Block pattern, or
block pattern, yeah.
Yeah, block pattern, exactly, for a pair of fairly straight leg jeans, and then I just use that, and I because everything is done right that on the crotch and everything. So then if I want to do more skinny jeans, I just narrow that pattern down, and if I want to do more wide leg jeans, I just add. And again, those adaptations I also show in my book, Sewing Jeans, so you don't really need to like get a new jeans pattern for any type of style you want. I would rather recommend that you get one right and then use that as a template when making adjustment on different type of jean styles, because sometimes you want a wide leg, sometimes you want a skinny jeans, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean the fit as I said, like from the hip to the waist doesn't change that much, so it's just easier to widen or make the legs more narrow. But once you have the fit on that area, and the same with on the tops, like from shoulder to bust height, if you nail the fit there, like 80% is done of the work.
Yes, I hope that managed to answer your question somewhat, at least. But yeah, fitting the trousers is definitely not an easy task, but you can do it for sure, and it's definitely worth the effort. So, Malena, have you got any question from a listener that we can answer?
I got one. Have you tried a knit presser foot, different from walking foot? If so, what did you dislike about this? I actually don't know what the knit presser foot. Have you heard about that?
No, never. I have an older Bernina from the late 80s, and I have not seen the presser foot offered. So I think this is definitely something we're going to have to ask you listeners, right? If you know more about this and what the benefits are for that. I can, because obviously the disadvantage, and I guess that is the question is asking, is the fact that a presser foot, when you're sewing on a regular sewing machine, you don't have the differential feed, so you can't adjust the speed of the feed hooks, meaning that usually when you're joining knit pieces together, the upper layer will be pushed forward somewhat. So, for instance, if you sew a side seam, you will probably end up that the upper layer of the fabric has gotten a bit stretched out and becomes a little bit wobbly. In particular, sometimes both layers becomes wobbly. So that is why a walking foot is sometimes helpful, because it can prevent the fabric from growing, because it can compensate for the lack of adjustment when it comes to and also adjusting the presser foot pressure can also prevent. So those are good tips. And the only knit presser foot that I am familiar with is the one that you use when you're sewing a sewing machine overlock stitch, which is a narrow foot, so it aligns with the edge. But I don't know if it. So that's the only one I know of. What are your thoughts on this, or what it could be?
I don't know either. Sounds very interesting. And if anyone has used that one, please share. One presser foot also can might help is Teflon foot. It has a Teflon surface underneath, so it runs smoother on top of the fabric, so the fabric don't get stuck that easily on the presser foot. So that might also help with knitted or basically any fabric as well. So that might be a good presser foot to try out. But there are so many different foots, and you want to try them all.
Yeah. There's always room for improvement, right? And I don't know how many presser foots I have, and honestly, I don't use them all, but I kind of like the idea of having them.
Yeah. What is your next question?
Yes, I have one that is actually regarding running a sewing business, which is how much time do we spend on customer questions in proportion to number of patterns sold? So, which is definitely a good question to answer, because sometimes, you have to think about where your time goes and is it valuable time? So, Malena, have you any thoughts about this, or in terms of customer questions?
Well, since I my portion of sold patterns are teeny tiny compared to what my day-to-day, how much time I work, I have so small sales numbers, so I really, it is not often at all that I get questions from people. The questions I got, I only sell on Etsy, that a few might have come back and said that they haven't received the patterns, the mail has not been sent out to them, which usually ends up like, yeah, but I can't send a mail to your email account either. Have you tried, like, do you have another email? And then it works to send to that email. So those questions I've had a few times, but then it's more like an Etsy, it's not about the pattern. So, well, since I have so few customers, I don't have so many questions. I have a lot more questions about, like, when freelance work, those mails I receive every now and then, like, how much would this cost and how long does it take? And so those might take a little bit more time, because then obviously, like, I need to know quite a lot about the pattern you want, or like the style that you want to design, before I can give a correct answer, like how much is this going to cost. So those are a little bit more not time consuming, but I get those mail more often compared to about my PDF patterns. But how is it for you? You have bigger sales.
Not huge though. Books is definitely a bigger leg in my business as well. But I was just trying to do the math, and I think less than no more than one question per 100 sold patterns. So I guess that ratio is pretty decent. And just like you, I think the most common question, which isn't really like a support question, it's more of that maybe they bought the sewing pattern and they are automatically delivered. I do this through Shopify, which is another e-commerce platform. And sometimes, they don't decide to sew the pattern until like 3 months later. And then, of course, maybe, it's hard to find the email. So that's definitely the most common question that I get too. Like, and it's very easy. I just go in and click and resend everything. And then it's never a hassle. And of course, sometimes it can end up in the spam folder as well. And occasionally I get questions before someone's purchasing the pattern, asking if can I use this material, for instance, to sew this pattern, or and in terms of instructions, I get so little. I mean, honestly, less than a handful a year, basically. It's like specific, like sewing questions, and sometimes someone has an issue printing the PDF files as well. That can also be an issue. Usually it's solved by using another unit or a different computer or anything like that. So it's usually not really the pattern. It's usually some technical issue on the user end that kind of prevents it. So as in terms of patterns, I think it's very little. I think the majority of questions that I get are not particularly about my products. They are more general sewing questions, which that don't really particularly relate to any of my specific products. So just like you, it's more in general questions rather than specific products questions. So I think that's good, and it also speaks about the fact that hopefully people understand the instructions and that the files that we're sending them are technically solid. So we don't really have to do a lot of support in that. And I think it's we put a lot of effort into the instructions, and I also always do like sew-alongs on my blog and sometimes YouTube videos as well. So I feel, it seems to me at least, that if people are sewing the patterns, they are generally feeling pretty well supported. And of course, I mean, I don't really do sewing patterns for beginners either. So I think most people are pretty familiar with the sewing techniques that are required. So to answer your question, I guess we can say not that much.
Then it's always like a difficult balance, because I mean, obviously, like, yes, if you have questions, like, reach out, we're happy to ask. But yeah, I sense a little bit with the question that, like, why is she asking? Like, maybe it's taking too much time, because time is precious. You don't have time to do everything, and to find a good balance is of course so important. I've seen a lot of pattern designers have, like, frequently asked questions. I think those are great. Like, if you want to, how do you say? You have very common questions. Like, those are usually like, here is the answer for these most common questions. So that might be a good tip to do on your blog site or whatever. If you have if you see same question coming several times.
Yeah. And it is, you know, the email does eat. I mean, if that's it does, you know, comments and emails eats a lot of time, and in full transparency, I am not able to answer all of these, especially when they're outside my like specific products and everything, because it's just I also have a day job and everything, so I'm not always able to answer everything, and that's just a priority that I have done within my business, that I don't answer all the emails that I get, because some of them are not like related to any of my products and or customer relations stuff. So yeah, that's how I deal with it, to be honest. And I think everyone wants to have this idea that they want to answer every comment and answer every email, but the reality is that we are just very small business owners, and you know, we have no way of controlling or gauging how much or how little, you know, interaction we will get. So it's not as in general, it's not an easy balance to strike. And I think when you grow, you will get more of these questions. I remember Tilly Walnes, I think, Tilly of the Buttons fame, the British sewing pattern entrepreneur. She's a very famous one, and you know, published several books as well. And I remember a podcast interview that she did when she was starting out, and I think she released a couple of patterns, but she was still also having a day job. And I think she said she was getting she was very prolific even back then. And I think she said, was she getting like 8 emails a day or a week or something like that? And she was just the same, you know, I can't answer them, you know, because a lot of people are like, oh, how do I get started sewing? And that's a very wide question to answer. And I felt that was very encouraging. I think that, you know, the permission basically is someone is like saying, okay, we can't do it all. And she said, it's impossible. I couldn't do that, you know, because you can't spend all evenings answering emails and comments, because you have to run a business. And that's not related to customer service, which is another topic. Of course, that has to work. But if you're going to do your priorities, you have to do them when it's the products that you sell, that you must be sure that is handled in a timely manner.
Yeah, totally understand that. One type of mail that I completely stopped even reading, I just delete them instantly, is, hi, we have found your website. It can be improved. We can help you design your website. I'm like, I know it can be improved. I know, but I don't. Not right now. Sorry, I don't want to be rude, but no. Thank you. No. I get them so often. I'm like, how, like, it's not that bad. Like, how do you find me? If you found me, then it should be working. Like, come on. But it's other businesses that, you know, obviously trying to sell their services. Yeah. But yeah, no, those I get so too frequently. So I'm like, I'm going to be rude here. I'm not going to even reply to them. No. They're basically spam, and we all get them, and it's very annoying, because it do clog the inbox and, you know, take away space from things that are much more important stuff. Yeah. I get those many a days. I need to update my spam filter, because I'm getting a bunch of those again now, unfortunately. Yeah. So those are the yeah, I hope that we managed to give you an idea, at least a little bit behind the scene of what it's like, you know, addressing customer questions, and in terms of well spent time when it comes to running a business. So do you have any more questions, Malena? Yeah, I got, oops, see it on my phone here now. This is a fun one. What's your favorite piece that you have sewn? I read this question before, so I can answer mine, and you can have a little bit of thinking time. So when I studied design, I actually, when we studied, we have, in Finland, we have this, how do you say, once a year, or so we have these grand balls. So I actually made my friend a ball gown, and she was the hostess of this one. So she, I mean, obviously really wanted to look nice. And that ball gown is still the prettiest thing I have ever sewn. And it was like fitted corset on top, and then the skirt was like a more voluminous. It was really, I was like so proud of that one. She had a picture of was it? I don't remember who wore it, but like a red carpet picture, and she was like,
Wow.
"I want to have this one," and I simplified it a little bit, but I'm like so satisfied with that result, and she was really happy, and she got so many compliments on the dress. So I'm like, I feel really proud. I can also tell you like what my worst, because for that same ball I also tried to make my ball gown. It ended up in the trash. Like literally, I threw it away in the trash. My sister had to send her ball gown by mail, and I received it like 2 days before the ball. So yeah, we have customer. Yeah. What you do for yourself and what you do for others, they are like not in a good balance.
That's such a funny story and very telling, because you would think that you were on your A game because you were doing things for the exact same occasion, right?
Yeah, very humbling experience from your highest height to like, yeah, down to the trash.
That's it's so funny because you say that, because I actually when you answered the question, I was thinking about mine, and I have basically the same answer. When it comes to skill level and execution, my best ever sewn garment was for the wedding dress for the sister of a former co-worker, and I'm definitely gonna make sure to upload the image because I do have it left. And again, it was also a replica of a wedding dress that was, I think, from a US designer, and she wasn't able to get it. It's a really, again, a corset, and there's like a band, a ribbon, embroidered all over the front of the dress. It's a really beautiful dress, and it was again really interesting. And it was, as you say, because when you have to do something for you else, you don't cut corners because you get like overly obsessed to get everything right. So that was my like first experience doing more of a high level sewing, and I would say my second favorite is my own wedding dress. My second wedding. I've also divorced 2 times, but I don't think it was due to the wedding dress. But it was a really beautiful. Since I always loved 50s fashion, and I had this vision for a dress that I loved even as a kid. And for my second wedding, I executed that. Using 2 incredibly difficult fabrics to sew with, silk chiffon and silk velvet, which are incredibly difficult to deal with. And again, it's a fitted corseted dress. So we're gonna post a picture of that dress as well. It's not traditional. It's in black velvet and black silk chiffon, but it's a beautiful dress, and I still have it.
That sounds amazing, and that's really I think that like the best thing about being able to sew yourself is on these occasions, because I mean, yeah, sewing, it's a really expensive hobby, but buying those kinds of dresses, like those are expensive, and there you can really, I mean, save money if you actually sew it yourself. Like, yeah, fabric costs as well, but like it's not even close to like what a store-bought like ball gown would cost. So yeah, there I really feel like sewing is a superpower, because you can create like whatever you want. Like, how many wedding dresses are there like you described? Like, you can really do your own thing. So yeah, it's then I feel like superpower to sew.
Yeah, it really is. It's very true. I totally agree with you. And again, it goes back to like investing in good quality fabrics, for instance. If you're able to get that's also a way to save a lot of money, because if you can like actually get your hands sometimes on designer fabrics, and those can cost like upwards of thousands and thousands of dollars or euro, and you can sew it, for not much at all. So there are definitely those like higher end stuff are usually, as you say, Malena, that's where you can actually save money. Whereas in terms of making like a simpler garment, with fast fashion, it's not the same. It's more, creative, getting the fit right and expressing your own creativity. Those are other values that you get, but maybe not a financial value for those. Yeah, it's interesting. I love this question because you definitely need to start thinking like stuff that we haven't really thought about. And I don't think I've ever gotten that question before. So thank you very much. It was nice to think about that. And it's funny also that we also both said like high end, like fancy gowns, not like a t-shirt, because we do that a lot. But they don't really stand out so much because it's more of a comfort zone. I think going outside your comfort zone is more rewarding and more memorable, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, and I have a question that I got in terms of grading sewing patterns. I mean, if someone is not familiar with that, but of course when you're doing a sewing pattern, you usually start with one size and then you grade up or down, which Malena is an expert in. And the question is book tips for learning how grading works. And I would love to hear your question, but also first, but I do have a book that I'm going to hold up here because I don't think there are many grading books available. But this one is called Grading for the Fashion Industry. It's a British book, and I will link to it. And this shows primarily manual grading. So if you're going to do grading on paper. So for instance, if you're just starting out a sewing business, maybe. I used this when I was, many moons ago, I sold clothes on Etsy, knit garments. And I just had 4 sizes, I think small, medium, large and X large. So for that project, it was very easy because I was only grading 4 sizes. So I could do this manually. And also what I like about this book is that I also have very detailed measurements table, which is good if you want to develop your own sizing. It has everything from, all the different like wrist and even I think knee circumference and stuff like that. So it's a good idea. I think it has actually 34 different measurements suggested on the body, which I think is very helpful if you're starting out. And that is, I think, the only book that I know that is very detailed. But Malena, you come from the school perspective because you're trained in this. So, did you have any good resources when it came to grading when you studied?
No, to be honest, no. I don't remember if this is so long ago. And to be honest, it wasn't really taught that much about grading when I went to school. The school that I went to. So I wasn't really. I don't remember if we had basically paper handed out to us. I don't remember that we had a specific book or anything. So that one sounds really great then. And the thing about grading is, it's complicated. To be honest, you can have or here's the thing: you can't have one grading fits all. It really depends on what kind of style you have. Like for example, if you have a really slim fitted woven shirt with collar, then maybe you want to have one type of grading. But then if you have a super oversized dropped shoulder graded type of style, then you have a different grading for that one. So it's really you can't really use the same grading rules for everything. You can use them as guidelines, and if you have those books, use them as guidelines, but don't think that, but since this garment is graded like this, then I can basically copy exactly the same grading to every type of shirt. It doesn't really, unfortunately, work like that. So you have to, and grading is really one of those trades in the industry that is some people love it and becomes really good at it, and that's a really niche competence, and it's great because you will have a lot of business because people like to do the base pattern and design that one, and it's fun and amazing. And then when it comes to grading, it's can just somebody else do this? So yeah, grading and pattern making, they obviously they are very much within the same knowledge, or how do you say, but they are also a little bit they can be two different types of competence. So yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated. It is, and also we should say that for you in your business, you do this in a digital environment, which means that it once you get the measurements right, it can be automatically applied. Whereas if you're doing a pen and paper, it's pretty difficult because you deal with such small increments. For instance, I mean, the side seams are obviously easier because then it's usually several centimeters or a centimeter at least on each side. But for instance, a shoulder point or a neckline between sizes, it's going to be such small increments. So I find it actually a little bit tricky to do manual grading with pen and paper because it's so difficult to get it exact. Because when you cut it, everything, it's easy to slide with the scissors. And just you say, Malena, it's very different depending on what type of garment. I think this book, as I talked about grading for the fashion, it does show, different type of like fitted garments, oversize, bras. If you have like draped garments, how you grade that, but I also think it's helpful to take a course. I did a weekend course where this was addressed, but also for a very simple garments, just to understand the principles of how you like move and add height and add length. And it's also that width is right height as well. So there's a lot of different things that goes into it. So I think my advice, at least, if you are thinking about starting, for instance, a sewing pattern line, I would definitely recommend that you hire a professional to do the grading digitally, just like Malena does, because it's just going to be so much easier. And I think, because time is also money, and unless, for instance, if you just have a small line, maybe like 3 sizes, maybe small, medium, or large. And of course, if a loose fitting t-shirt, then I think you could do grading yourself, but usually you have more complicated garments than that. So I would definitely recommend to hire that out, honestly. But it's also good to understand like the basics, and also as your own designer, you need to figure out your own measuring size table. I mean, what type of body are you serving? Because there is no standard for that. I mean, everyone has a different idea. Sometimes they do patterns that for people that has a larger chests, maybe, or a tummy, so there are lots of different type of body variations, and so that's also something you need to consider.
Yeah, that's like such a good point, because even like before you even think about grading, you need to decide what body measurements should you have, what size should you have. That's like, well, back to the first question, like what different questions do you get from like customers when I like for my freelance work. That's like I get quite often like asked if I can do the grading, and it's like, yeah, so what body size, like what sizes do you want? And then it's like fairly often they say like extra small to extra large. I was like, yeah, and what does that mean to you for your company? Because that can vary from different departments or like different companies, like small, medium, large. They don't have like a general, these are the body measurements for those sizes. Like whatever company can come up with basically whatever measurements for those sizes. So it's like, yeah, you need to go back to the beginning. Like I can help you with that, obviously, but like we need to decide that first before we can even start talking about the grading. And it's really like so important to actually really give this a good thought, like what kind of sizes do you want? Like how big should the measurement jumps be in between those different sizes? Some products almost demand like certain smaller gaps. For example, jeans, they are usually in inches sizes, which means that it's really a small gap in between those sizes. So it's so much easier then for you to find that exact size for you, since it's so small gaps. Like there are so many different sizes to choose from. But for an oversized T-shirt, then is like you get away with having more bigger jumps in between those sizes. So you don't have to produce so many sizes, because obviously the more sizes you have, the more it's going to cost more, basically. So you really need to have a clear like vision, like what types of garments do I want in the future? What type of sizes does that require? How big size range do I want? How many different sizes do I need then? So yeah, grading, it's not just done in a it's complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also very, very great points. And again, you know, I think an advice if you're planning on doing a sewing business or a fashion business, that is definitely to hire professionals, because you will save so much time and also ensure that the end result is of the highest quality. I think one common mistake I think we're all done when we're starting out is to try to do everything ourselves. Well, I think it can be helpful because it gives you an understanding of things. Like I'm happy that I tried grading myself, and then I realized that this is not for me, and then that way you can focus on your strength rather than trying to be a jack of all trades and perhaps not a master of none, basically. So I think that's a very good thing to keep in mind. Unfortunately, we don't have time for any more questions because we're going to have to cut this episode a little bit short now. But if you have any more questions, you can either drop them on our Instagram account, Stitching Tales Pod, with 1D, or on our YouTube channel, Stitching Tales Pod. And also we have an email address, which again is stitchingtalespod with 1D at gmail.com. And all these are, of course, linked in the show notes of this episode. And we'd love to, I would really, really enjoy doing this episode. So it would be awesome if you want to send us even more questions. And we're definitely going to do a follow-up. And if we didn't have time to answer your question, don't worry. We're going to do more episodes like this in the future. So hopefully you learned a few new things. And thank you so much for listening. I am Johanna Lundström.